Joining us now from No Ceilings, we're going to talk a little NBA draft with Corey Taluba from No Ceilings, the curator of vibes. Now, Corey, thanks for taking a few minutes for us, man. That's a title that comes with a lot of pressure, being a curator of vibes.
Well, every day I wake up knowing that, I have that weight on my shoulders and I have a standard to adhere to. So I take it very seriously over at No Ceilings.
I love it. As we are in the thick of it right now, we come out of the draft lottery and into the NBA draft combine. What have been your takeaways with the way that the draft board kind of fell post lottery and what you ended up seeing throughout the NBA draft combine process?
Well, I think, most people were shocked that Atlanta made the jump that they did. But at the same time, I feel like over the last few years, since that they've changed the way that the lottery percentages played out, there have been a bunch of different jumps in one way or the other and a bunch of falls, right? The Pistons, once again, dropped to an unfortunate fate in a way that, most franchises wouldn't have to deal with. But I kind of like the unpredictability of it. As someone who covers the draft year round, it makes it really fun. Anytime you can do like a tankathon sim, it feels like that order could be the order that actually happens. At the draft combine, I love the draft combine. It is for the draft sickos out there for sure, but there's a lot of really good stuff that you can find with some of these players who maybe didn't have the biggest hype because they were at maybe a mid-major school. You look at Jalen Williams, Brandon Pajemski. These are guys who had a little bit of hype, but they played in the combine scrimmages, had a great week, and all of a sudden now they're top 20 picks, lottery picks. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for players to really make a name for themselves that otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to. This year, the coverage was a little bit different if you had watched in any capacity from prior years for one reason in particular, but it is always an incredible week of hoop for the truly psychotic draft fans.
Corey, before we get into kind of what would make sense for Portland or kind of how draft boards are shaking out, who are the guys that are both rising and falling following the intel that kind of came with Combine Week?
I think that Reed Sheppard helped himself a little bit with his, his combine strength, agility testing, 42-inch vertical from him, I think was important to let people know he really was more athletic maybe than people thought that he was. I think that a guy like Dalton Connect helped himself because he had pretty good, testing numbers as well. And, for an older prospect who kind of burst onto the scene, who clearly was an athlete, when he had a straight line, questions about his defense potentially, seeing that he does have the potential to, move, more side to side was definitely helpful.
Two white guys who beat the accusations?
I'm sorry?
Two white guys who beat the accusations, you're saying?
Exactly. I think Devin Carter is another guy that really had a good combine week as well with some of the athletic testing. He had a great wingspan. I know the NBA website really panicked after some fake measurements came out. Stephen Castle was having a tough week for a while, but they fixed that, and he's going to be just fine. So, yeah.
As we look here in Portland, obviously dropping down to 7 was not what fans wanted here in Portland, but if you're not going to be in the top 2, dropping down isn't the worst case scenario here in this situation. As you look at where Portland is at and slotted at 7 and holding Golden State's 14th picks, what is your assessment of this draft class and what kind of value can they get in a draft that has been regarded as one that's not very deep?
Yeah, I don't think that there is much of a difference between the 7th pick and the 14th pick as far as the kind of talent that is going to be available to you, to be completely honest. So I guess from a perspective of this is a weak class, you can look at it as, maybe the 7th pick might not be as impactful as your normal 7th pick in any given year, but your 14th maybe is a little bit better than that of in a normal year because you could get a player pretty easily that is better than the guy that you get at 7. I think that even still, if you listen to any mock draft podcast, if you go to any mock draft, whether it's on No Ceilings or ESPN or Bleacher Report, you're going to find an order that is probably not the same. So, honestly, we drafted our last mock draft. We had Donovan Clingan go into Portland at 7, and he is, technically like the 4th ranked prospect amongst the consensus public scouts. So, you're going to be able to get a talented guy at 7 still, because I think that this year in particular, teams are going to be drafting for not only, who is the most highly touted, biggest potential kind of prospect, but maybe guys who actually fit their roster and their team, meaning that some people are going to slip because there just aren't enough home run swings to play by the best player available mantra. There's only a few of those guys in this class, and even those guys are guys that have question marks. So I think that there are going to be people that are getting mocked towards the top of the draft who could fall and be available to Portland at 7.
When you look at what Portland has to do kind of coming out of this draft, going into next year, and then realistically going into the 2025 lottery, what do you think that they should do with those picks? Do you look at it as both picks should be swinging for the fences, getting the most upside as possible? Is it trying to get a guy with a higher floor while balancing out swinging for the fences? What do you kind of think is the best possible approach holistically for them going into this draft?
I think the thing that they should be accomplishing, whether they're swinging or maybe taking a guy with a higher floor, I think that they need to target somebody who can shoot the basketball effectively. If you're building around Scoot Henderson, and obviously you have Shaden, you have Anton, those guys are great shooters in their own right. But when you have a Scoot, you have a DeAndre Ayton, you can't get enough shooting around those kinds of players. So I think that they need to acquire somebody who is a real shooter, maybe with both of those picks. I think having 2 picks affords you the luxury of maybe taking that swing with one of those picks and maybe finding that higher floor guy with one of the other picks. But there's so many different ways. I don't think that they can go wrong whether they take 2 swings. They take a guy like Tijan Salan in the draft, who is a 6'10", 6'11". Portland loves their big wings with length. Like, if they take a guy like that who has the potential to be a shooter, maybe play style kind of like a Michael Porter Jr., is a little raw, but is playing in a pro league, still in the playoffs there. I mean, I can see that being a guy who, you would target in that vein. But also, if you want to, we mentioned Dalton Connect earlier. He's a guy, he's a little older, so you think that he has a higher, or a lower floor, but he's a real deal shooter. So I think whatever the case is, continue adding pieces that you think can fit around your core. You're not getting a game changer in this draft at those picks, most likely. Crazier things have happened. Obviously, you have your Giannis, you have your Nikola Jokic examples. Those are few and far between. Just get guys that you think fit around the players that you believe are your biggest building blocks. And to me, those guys are going to have to shoot the ball.
Look, I'm picking it up now. I can see why you're the curator of vibes, because you were just speaking our language right there. You picked all the vibes up. Big body wing that can shoot. Yes, we use both of the picks on a guy like that. Take a flyer, go and get him. I love it. Who is a sleeper in this draft? A guy that you like a lot that maybe you feel other draft analysts or people around the scouting process may be missing on a little bit?
Well, right now, I think Bub Carrington is a really fun guy. For the people who follow this stuff all year round, like, he burst onto the scene early at Pitt. He had like a triple-double. He's one of the youngest players in the class. Kind of tailed off towards the end, but to me, he's as good a swing as anybody in this class. He's a 6'5" guard who can get his own shot. Definitely needs to get stronger so he can, it can help with his finishing around the rim and on the other side of the ball. But I think offensively he has a pro-style game, and he's a real-deal shot maker and playmaker. And when I say the playmaking stuff, what's impressive, him being 18, having the ball as much as he did, he doesn't turn the ball over a lot, so he's a good decision maker on top of the playmaking that he's shown. I think he has potential, almost as much potential as any of these kind of raw, five-star guys who have question marks at the top of the draft. And right now, where we're at in the process, he's a guy that you're not going to see mocked in the lottery all that much. As far as, maybe some other sleepers in this class, I love Jamal Shed. He's a guy who, he's not really going to help you with your shooting much, but he's just a winner. He knows how to play the game. He's been in big games. To me, like, you know, if you look at Davion Mitchell, I don't think there's a big difference in now that we've seen what Davion is in the league because his shooting didn't translate. I don't really think there's a big difference in where they're at as prospects. And Davion went in the top 10. Jamal Shedd's going to go somewhere in the second round. He's really interesting. That a guy like Dylan Jones from Weber State, mid-major, you know, a guy who is just a box score filler. You know, 6'6" in shoes, 6'11" wingspan. He put up 20, 10, and 5 this year. If you look at his athletic testing at the combine this year compared to last year, he made major strides. I think he added 4.5 inches to his vert, got quicker in the agility drills. So he's another guy that I think super high IQ, and if he's in the right situation, he's going to be a guy that we look back and go, man, like if he was at a Power 5, he probably would have gone way higher, but he was a sleeper because, you know, he wasn't on ESPN all the time. So I think he's another interesting guy.
I got a two-parter for you. One, what's kind of your ideal 7-14 pick combination for Portland as things kind of unfold? Again, ideal, not necessarily big board wise, but just realistic fit. And then who are a couple names to know for picks 34 and 40? As Portland also has 2 second-round picks that are a little earlier than most.
Yeah, I think, you know, if you're depending on your strategy coming into this draft, I think a guy that fits at 7, that kind of goes along with the type of players that Portland has valued with those big wings, like a guy like Cody Williams, who is a little bit higher of a swing potential-wise, but still kind of fits because he's like more of like a connecting guy. He shot it well. He's got good touch, not crazy volume on his shooting, but still you can picture him turning into a good shooter. He's Jalen Williams' brother from the Thunder, so he's a guy that you know has the NBA kind of DNA inside of him already and knows what it takes. And then a guy like Dalton Connect, if he fell to 14, again, he's a wing shooter. I think that would be kind of a home run type of draft. I think there's a possibility that, a Zachary Richeche falls to, pick 7 as well. He's a 6'10" shooter from France, big wing, again, similar to the guys that Portland has valued it with that archetype. And then if maybe a guy like Tristan Da Silva is, more of the safer floor kind of guy, who's another 6'9" wing, who's a really impressive shot profile, 40% from 3, 50% in the mid-range, 80+% from the line, positive assist-to-turnover ratio. So it's just going to be a guy to fill in the gap. I think guys like that are super interesting for Portland and realistically can be part of their core. And again, like if Donovan Clingan's there, if he falls, given how the board shook out, which I think is a possibility, I think he's a guy that even though you have, 2 centers, one of them has injury questions and one of them, is always going to have kind of consistency questions, even though he finished the year pretty strong. So I think Donovan Clingan adding that winning DNA, another guy who can set screens, allow and Shaedon and Scoot to get downhill just by the fact that he's a large lob threat that sets good screens and plays defense. I think those are pretty intriguing names for Portland.
He's the founder of No Ceilings, where they cover the NBA in the draft process better than anybody else. Corey Taluba, thank you for the time, man. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks, Corey.
There's a lot. There's a lot right there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think he is kind of speaking Portland's language here. And when we talk about, I think a lot of people surprised that the Blazers would use 7 and 14, but when he breaks it down the way he does, it makes sense. Like if what the Blazers are looking for is a wing that can shoot, there is a lot of variance in the draft of the boom bust kind of deal.
And Cody Williams profiles as a guy who can shoot but didn't do it on volume, while Dalton Connect was arguably the best scorer in college basketball last year.
And if you use both of those picks, you're hoping you get them in, you see what they got, one of them works out.
Look, I wouldn't be thrilled with using the 7 pick on Dalton. I think that's a little too rich because of the upside probably isn't quite necessarily there. But if he was there at 14, my eyebrows would definitely raise. I mean, look, I joked about beating the accusations. I looked at Dalton Connect's draft data. He was in like the 90th plus percentile in almost every athletic testing.
That seems good. Is that good?
Yeah.
Is that?
And I'm not talking about in this class. I'm talking about in the history of the combine. So yeah, he did well. He did really well. And again, he's the whitest white guy I'd ever whited. Like if you looked at him, you'd be like, if you're lining guys up to make picks on the basketball court, you're looking at him going, do I need a shooter? If so, yes. But you don't think of him as being that athlete. But then you watch the tape and you go, oh, this dude backpacked Tennessee's entire offense for 30 games this year. So he's going to be scaled down in the NBA, but that'd be an interesting one to take a look at.